Are on a well-deserved break, but it only stands to reason we've got a Super Bowl champion with the race to the Super Bowl narrowing a little bit. Chris Canty is with us this morning for the next 4 hours. Good morning. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Zoo. How you doing?
I'm doing great. First things first, I'm doing great, but not nearly as great as the Cleveland Browns. Kevin Stefanski right up there for Coach of the Year. Let's just hear from Kevin Stefanski on the resurgent play of his quarterback, Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I thought Baker was outstanding tonight. He was dialed in. It's really what I expect from him. It's what he expects from himself. It's how he practices. But I really thought he was sharp.
Let's lay it on the line here. They haven't exactly clinched a playoff berth just yet. They could get there next week. They'll be playing at the Jets, second team to have that Giants-Jets double dip on the road. The Niners did it earlier this season. So if the Browns can win and get some help by losses from three other teams who they're chasing at this particular point or are chasing them, then you're in a situation where they'll snap the NFL's longest playoff drought, which goes back to 2002. It appears as though it's only a matter of time until that happens. The biggest reason the Browns are in position to make the playoffs for the first time in almost 20 years is what?
I think it's the marriage between the run game and the pass game. And Kevin Stefanski has done a good job of figuring out what Baker Mayfield is good at and what he's not, and trying to put him in situations that accentuate his strengths. You look at what they did last night, being able to stay with the run game just enough to provide that balance and the threat that makes play action effective. Only 3.2 yards per carry between Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. But in those 22 attempts, you keep those linebackers honest, you keep those guys coming downhill, and then you're able to find those voids between the second and third levels of the defense. And Baker Mayfield was surgical last night, only 5 incompletions. And you got to give some love to his offensive line, too, because they kept him clean. Even with Hubbard going out, they still provided clean pockets for him. Only one quarterback hit in 37 dropbacks. So that's impressive that the offensive line could keep him that clean. But I think Baker Mayfield's understanding of what Kevin Stefanski wants to do and Kevin Stefanski's understanding of what his quarterback strengths are, that's what's leading the charge for this late season surge for the Browns.
They had 2 95-yard scoring drives, including when one was capped, Jarvis Landry turning around, popping up a 1. Popping up a 3 to pay homage to Odell Beckham Jr. You saw that?
Isaac Yiadom for the Giants didn't like that too much. But, I mean, the Giants were shorthanded on the back end. They didn't have James Bradbury. So you knew that their defense would struggle, especially in pass coverage. What I was a little bit surprised was with the complexion of the game, because I thought that their head coach, Joe Judge, did some things to put even more pressure on a defense that was trying to support an offense with a backup quarterback.
Indeed. And Joe Judge did say, I don't regret any of the aggressive play calling that was made. He definitely seems like a guy that doesn't have a lot of regrets. He just does what he wants to do and moves forward. From the Browns standpoint, you know, Jay is our resident Giant fan, but he actually said all week long last week on the program that even though he's a ride or die Giants fan, that this is a bigger game for the Browns. It certainly turned out to be a bigger game considering where their aspirations are vis-a-vis the Giants. But Jay also said, and I was taken a little aback by that, as was Keyshawn, that he really believes the Browns can, ready for this, win the Super Bowl.
Ooh.
Win the Super Bowl. We've got all these things about snapping the playoff drought, getting to the 10-win mark for the first time since 2007. They haven't won the division in 28 years. That's also the longest drought. I mean, that was the AFC Central. It wasn't even called the North back then. I think the Steelers win tonight. They sort of pretty much put it out of reach on ESPN against the Bengals. Super Bowl, though, is that a little too much? I was a little bit taken aback by that.
Jay's putting a little too much on that one. You know, sometimes you have that overreaction Monday, but you're talking about a Browns defense that prior to this game gave up over 80 points in the 2 games that they played. So I think it's a little too early for Super Bowl talk, but it's definitely reasonable to expect this team to get into the postseason and potentially win a postseason game, which is a huge step for the Cleveland Browns program, for their new general manager, Andrew Berry, and their new head coach, and Kevin Stefanski.
It's amazing. Baker's 25, Garrett's 24, Andrew Berry, the GM, is 33, the head coach, Kevin Stefanski, is 38. All they do is build, implode, build, implode. Now it feels like they got a nice, young, great foundation to work with. Again, it stands to reason that even though the Browns have won 10 games already this season, and Chris, there's an extra playoff spot available in the AFC and the NFC this year. We got 7 teams making it. You would think, hey, a team gets to 10 wins when more teams than ever are making the NFL playoffs.
Yep.
That would be enough, but it is still not enough for the Browns. They can clinch a playoff berth next week with the win at the suddenly resurgent, on fire New York Jets, tongue planted firmly in cheek, and then they need losses by Baltimore, the Colts, or the Dolphins to get in. So they need a little bit of help from the opposition of those three teams. Biggest thing here is Baker is really, I mean, look, even in the Monday night loss, I thought he was great. He was great yesterday. You mentioned how efficient he was. Why are you believing in him? What's different about it?
Well, I think the timing of the passing game is there now. You know, with Baker Mayfield, some of the things that they were doing in the first half of the season, it just looked a little bit off. But now it feels like it's in sync. And I guess that should be a reasonable expectation that this is the time that they start clicking, given the season that we've had in the offseason. No OTAs, no mini camps, modified training camp schedule. So, you're trying to figure things out on the fly. And I think now is that time where they're hitting that sweet spot. And it's perfect for them because this is when you want to be playing your best football. You want to be going into the playoffs with a lot of momentum, and you can certainly say that about the Cleveland Browns in the way they're playing right now.
So you look at Stefanski last year at this time working with the Minnesota Vikings. You extract him from the Vikings, you put him on the Browns, and you look what's happened to the Vikings after that 1-5 start. They got out to a nice building block after that. Now they've lost a couple in a row. Their offense seems to be scuffling a little bit. Meanwhile, he goes to Cleveland. He's been the antidote. He's been the reason for success. Where does he fall to you in the Coach of the Year discussion?
I think he's in the top 3 or 4 candidates for Coach of the Year. I would put Sean McDermott there. I would still keep Mike Tomlin up there, even though some of the shine on the Pittsburgh Steelers is worn off with the 2 consecutive losses. Keeping in mind they played 3 games in 12 days and their season has been kind of shuffled due to COVID concerns. So I just think that the fact that he's been able to keep that group together, even with the injuries and Big Ben coming back from the injury that he had with the elbow, I just feel good about the job that Mike Tomlin has done. Sean McDermott's in that conversation as well. So I just think that Stefanski and what he's done and having the potential to get the Cleveland Browns back into the postseason for the first time in 2002 and seemingly stabilizing the organization, you have to give him credit for that.
There's no doubt about it. Also, we mentioned Odell was kind of there in spirit. He certainly wasn't there last night. As I mentioned during the touchdown that Landry had, he stood up, popped the 1, popped the 3. Obviously, Odell had so many great moments in that end zone. In the first quarter of the game, there was almost a one-handed catch right where Odell made his famous save
right in
a
that
few
same
years
end
ago,
zone.
right?
Yep.
There's some karma, something going on there last night for the Giants and the Browns. But we've had this discussion all season long, and it seems ridiculous when you say it on its face. But with regards to a little bit less pressure, a little bit regards to Baker having a little bit more say and latitude in the offense, do you think the extraction of Odell, not taking anything away from his talent, but just that he's always going to want the ball and there's always pressure to go that way, has having no Odell for this stretch, not counting his talent, for this stretch, helped Baker maybe ease some of the pressure off him?
Well, I think it's put more focus on Baker in terms of him understanding the offense and where he needs to go with the football, not trying to do too much, but playing within the structure of what Kevin Stefanski is trying to provide. And when you do that, when you play within yourself as a player and you trust the pieces around you, you're going to have success in this league. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing, leaning on the running game when it calls for it, but then being opportunistic with shots and chunk plays downfield. I think that's the most important thing. Baker Mayfield being able to take advantage of the play action as Kevin Stefanski's dialing it up. Coming into yesterday's game, Baker Mayfield was top 5 in yards off of play action. He was second in terms of quarterback rating off of play action. So I have 4th in terms of yards per attempt. So I think that Baker Mayfield has a good feel for what they want to do, and he's not trying to press and do too much. That way you cut down on the turnovers, you cut down on the mistakes, and when the Cleveland Browns play clean football, you can see that this team has a talent level that's going to allow them to compete with anybody.
There's no doubt about it, especially after the reputation of being missing on picks left and right. They certainly do seem to have the requisite talent. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. All of our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. The college football playoff is set. We'll talk about that this morning at 6:45 a.m. Eastern. Keyshawn J. Will Zubin reminding you to go to ESPN.com/Bowlmania for a chance to win a trip to next year's national championship. On the way, the Saints got their Super Bowl MVP back. But have these words ever been uttered before? Was it a mistake to start?